Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this public hearing for the proposed unit development in North Ipswich. My name is Justin Begor, and I'm the Manager of Development Planning here at Ipswich City Council. My team process development applications across the city, much like the one we're here to discuss today. Ipswich City Council respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners, the Yagara, Yugara and Yugarapul people of the Yugara-Yagara language group, as custodians of the land and waters we share. We pay our respects to their elders past and present as the keepers of the traditions, customs, cultures and stories of proud peoples. A couple of housekeeping matters. In the event of an emergency, please follow staff direction. There's plenty of council employees in the room, but exit through the rear door to the right, down the stairs, into the Nicholas Street precinct, up to Darcy Doyle Place. Toilets are also out the door to the right, beyond the lift on the right-hand side, and there's plenty of water, coffee and tea, so please help yourself. The Independent Decision Review Panel was introduced at Ipswich City Council in 2019 to ensure there was greater transparency and community confidence in Council's decision-making processes. It's not a legislative process, and it's something that only Ipswich City Council does in the state of Queensland. So the panel, in terms of how it works, the panel, consisting of independent expert members, convene to review the recommendations of council officers. The decision review panel is not called upon for all applications. However, only for those which are sensitive to the community and attract a lot of public submissions through the public notification period. The public hearing today is just one component of the Independent Decision Review Panel process, and it's an opportunity for the applicants of the development application, as well as members of the community who have made a submission through the public notification process, to address the panel directly with their views on the application. The panel's not here to answer any questions about the proposal, but rather hear everyone's views to help inform their recommendation. Once this hearing is complete, council officers will finalise our assessment over the next couple of months, and the idea being that we will share our recommendation with the expert panel to review, and they will also prepare their own recommendation. Those two recommendations will form a report which will be prepared to committee and council, whereby the mayor and all of the councillors make a decision on this application. So on behalf of Ipswich City Council, thank you everyone for making the time to come here today. And I'll hand you over to the panel chair, Leo Mewing, to introduce himself and the other panel members.
Thanks, Justin. Welcome all, and thank you for attending the public hearing of the Independent Decision Review Panel for the application at W M Hughes Street in North Ipswich. My name's Leo Mewing. I'm the chairperson that's been appointed for this application. I'm a town planner and I've got a range of experience across Queensland. You're all here because you've got an active interest in the development application and how that may interact with the community in which it's located. It's a healthy part of the planning process for community interests to be heard and considered. And the IDRP, less of a mouthful, process provides for an independent review of the council's statutory assessment of the development. So I'm joined today by a selection of experts that will ultimately be undertaking that independent review. The experts appointed for this application have extensive and suitable experience in their respective fields. And by way of introduction, the experts for this application today are Hannah Richardson, who is a traffic and transport expert, and Tony McAllister, who is a stormwater flooding and floodplain management expert. So today is an opportunity for each of the applicant and submitter speakers to provide an overview of your views about the application for the benefit of the experts and the council. As such, as each of you make your presentations, there's a few things I encourage you to keep in mind and to attend to. First, an administrative aspect: to allow the live stream to work, which is happening at the moment, please ensure you speak into the microphone. Second, the purpose is to avail the expert panel the information that will be helpful to us as we make our assessment. We have, and we will also independently review the relevant development application material, including the submissions that you've made. Please keep to the time that's been allocated to you. I'll strictly enforce that so that it's fair and equitable across the people involved. And I'll give you a warning with 2 minutes to run. Importantly, please be respectful of everyone here whilst you may not agree with something that is being said by someone, please let them speak without interruption. That way we get to hear the material that's being presented so that we can make our independent decision. And as advised by Justin, it's an opportunity to provide your views as speakers to the panel. Unfortunately, not the opportunity to ask questions. It's an opportunity for you to point out things that you'd like us to consider. So we might launch straight in. Sorry, there's the site, as I'm sure you all know it. And there's the panel members. I forgot to do this before as well. Our speakers today, we've got a number of them. The first speaker will be Boyd Sargent on behalf of the applicant. And then we have submitter presentations from Shane Earle, Peggy Merriman, Liz Tilbrook, Nick White, and Adrian Dean. So we might launch in. And the first speaker, I'll welcome Boyd Sargent.
Thank you, panel chair, elected reps, community for turning out today, and as well as the officers for showing up. For this, our opportunity to talk about the application at W M Hughes. This is one of a number of developments that our client has undertaken in this specific area, and this is probably one of the most exciting for Ipswich that we believe is being proposed at the moment. Just briefly on the proponent, it's Leader, who have a long history in developing within Ipswich, with over $1 billion worth of development currently underway in Ipswich itself, delivering affordable homes for families and the key workers of Ipswich, and direct and indirect jobs. Importantly, and for this application, they're also the owner of Riverlink Shopping Centre, which provides over 2,000 employment jobs for people of the Ipswich and would service this development as well. In dealing with what we are talking about here today in more detail, what we're talking about is delivering a affordable housing unit complex under a group title management system for the site at W M Hughes. The application includes a preliminary approval. So in terms of the preliminary approval aspect, that sets up the framework by which the future applications on this site are assessed. It includes a number of plans and concepts that would be sought for approval to deliver the overall concept. Importantly, the application also includes stage 1, showing the commitment for development of this site and the ability to deliver housing quickly and in a well-serviced location. The application, as indicated there, includes a number of other components of development approval with the application, which is designed to enable us to quickly get on the ground and start delivering these houses that are in much need for the location. The proposal does rely on number 22, W M Hughes, for its access onto W M Hughes itself. In terms of this site, as I've mentioned, it's one of 4 that Leader is looking to develop and partner with and fund others to develop. The site has been appropriately zoned, as have the other 4 properties, but I'm joined here today by Brendan Nelson, who is from Property Solve, to assist in giving some background to the zoning and this site and the others that occur in this specific area.
Thanks, Boyd. Brendan Nelson, Town Planner. I was a development manager at Ipswich City Council for almost 7 years. Was also the National President of the Planning Institute of Australia, the Queensland Planner of the Year and the Australian Planner of the Year, and was also the head of planning for the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. So I have been working in and around this space for some time. One of the things I wanted to just provide to the panel's benefit and also for the members of the community is that the zoning for this area was set in 2006, and it was identified there was 2 clear areas identified for the particular site. There was a riverside precinct, and then there was a residential precinct, and there was an area in between, which is shown in the grey area on the right-hand side, which was subject to resolution once operational works were approved and the engineering works were completed. So there was a special opportunity zone which identified this site for residential purposes all the way back since 2006. So there has been clear intent. There was obviously quite a series of defining events that have impacted this site. And I think it's important that the panel are aware that the flood event from 2010 actually occurred prior to the approved operational works that occurred on site. And so whilst that happened earlier in the year, the operational works happened later in the year, and they were approved engineering works. And so what you'll see in that time series of photos is actually the works that occurred after the 2010 flood event. So when you see flood lines in the old scheme that refer to cutting across the residential precinct, they were predicated on the original flood line before the approved engineering works. I just wanted to touch, before I throw back to Boyd, I undertook a review of the site for the landowner in relation to the 2025 scheme, and particularly into the proposal to back zone the site. And what I can say to you is that I went through and had a look at Council's feasible alternative assessment report, which is a statutory requirement under the Planning Act. And I think it was an incredibly comprehensive review by Council, and Council should be congratulated. That particular review identified 1,727 lots which were suitable for split zoning across the city. This site was included in that particular site for split zoning, and of the 1,720 odd that were identified for split zoning, there was only 8 that I could find which were back zoned, and this was one of those. The other 3 of the others were owned by Council. There was one at Riverview where there was strong circumstance to support it, and there was 2 at North Buval where the flood risk was very problematic. So for the panel, I think it's important that you understand the difference between what's actually transpired under the old scheme, what Council's deliberate decision is in relation to the new scheme to change the zone, and the fact that Council's own feasible alternative assessment report has identified this site as being suitable for a split zone. I'll throw back to Boyd at this particular point. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Brendan. That was very important information there in terms of the concept evolution over this site. And it's an important thing to realise that in terms of the application here, a lot of effort and time is spent in developing up these concepts and proposals and plans and drawings and reports that go into delivering a concept for a particular site. And clearly what drives that and guides that is the planning scheme, and this is an application that's submitted under the existing under the existing planning scheme, and we do acknowledge the commencement of the new scheme. Dealing with the site specifically, as I've indicated from the start, we access via W M Hughes and also through 22 W M Hughes, which has an existing approval which establishes connections in terms of road widths and road heights to our boundary and are transferred through the development itself. The site, as Brendan's indicated, also has the benefit of an existing approval which has been implemented on and filled to between 19.3 and 21.8 metres. This proposal, as I've touched on, is to provide over 400 build-to-rent social affordable housing product in a location that is identified, as we've indicated under the scheme, and as you can see clearly from this aerial, is connected to the Riverlink Shopping Centre and the employment, social, recreation and entertainment that is provided via that, as well as the connection into the CBD proper. So these residents have high accessibility. Some of the more disadvantaged in our community have high accessibility to services that they are able to walk to. This is a group title development, so there is onboard management within the development itself that address the upkeep, management, as well as key maintenance activities around the development itself. As I've indicated, this is an application under the 2006 planning scheme, and importantly, as we've indicated, there's a split zoning on this site currently, open space and the special development area. That open space area largely reflects the lower terrace area on site and the flood affected areas adjacent to the Bremer River. There is also the special opportunity zone, which occurs on the upper field platform and adjoins the rail yards. Dealing with the scheme in more specifics, and as is outlined in the scheme, and as Brendan has touched on, there are a number of precincts within the planning scheme that dictate what may or may not happen over the site. We have a number of different precincts of which we believe we're consistent with the intent of and the purpose of. And specifically, the proposal is within Area 3 or Precinct 3, which is shown as the Riverside residential area under the planning scheme. In terms of how we've responded to that planning framework, has been the development of the concept plan that many of you have seen and looked at. This has been informed by various experts from heritage consultants, hydraulic consultants, ecology, urban design, as well as traffic issues and traffic assessment. So what's proposed in this concept is a new urban village at the doorstep to Riverlink Shopping Centre, providing this rather higher density development in an area that is perfectly suited and adjacent to and serviced by the principal zoned land under the current planning scheme. In forming this concept, as I've indicated, there are a number of specialists who have inputted their design, their planning, their assessment as to what may or may not happen over the site, and it's reflected in this concept. As I've indicated, the application also includes stage 1 to the application, which includes the first 6 of the proposed apartment buildings on site. These have been informed by a range of input from architects, urban designers, as well as social housing providers who we've already been in conversation with for the delivery of housing in this location. The buildings are designed and have taken on some of the character elements that are in this location. And character is an important component for the overall development itself, in that we adjoin the rail yards, which has quite a distinct urban character in this location. We've tried to reflect the materials and forms of that structure within our overall development, noting that we're apartment buildings compared to the industrial building, and then the more traditional residential areas that occur beyond the rail yard. So in terms of our proposal and the preliminary approval, clearly we've got the existing zoning in place, and the preliminary approval seeks to establish the new boundaries for this. And as part of that, we have 3 lots proposed with the application and the zonings that go with those. Our lot 2, that's indicated there in the light blue, is the area that's intended to be open space. The dark blue is the intended urban residential area on the filled upper platform, with lot 3 being existing rail yard lines to the rail yards that are under our ownership. In discussions with council, there's been an indication not to take public open space as part of the development, which is able to be accommodated with the area still being retained by the body corporate for their management, with easements created to enable key aspects such as the Basil Bikeway to be delivered through the site. A series of roads will also have easements over them, so the public also has free movement through the site. In terms of the form, as I've indicated in that concept earlier on, it includes a new urban village. This is centred around an open space area within the filled platform area, and a number of buildings that are arranged around that and cascade from the rail yards down to the river edge of the top of the platform. That's from 7 stories down to 4 stories. Importantly, when we review the concept against the planning scheme, you can see the planning scheme is already contemplating multi-storey buildings and apartments at this location. This is an extract from the scheme. Buildings are generally 3 stories in height with the opportunity for 6. Ours, as I've said, is typically 4 to 7, and that is in relation to hydraulics, why there is a slight differentiation there. And I will touch on that when we get to that specific issue. The buildings have been arranged specifically, again, in consultation with the urban designers, as well as the planning issues and view analysis, to make sure that we have cascading buildings overlooking the open space areas and overlooking the Basil bikeway to provide high public visibility and a safe bikeway through the development site itself. Additionally, the buildings are spaced so that we have view sharing, not only internally, but externally. So the residential areas which occur further to the east and are on higher land also are able to view through the development itself, providing a quite permeable development. Connections, and this is an important aspect to the overall development. Connecting this site back to the community and connecting the community through the development and through to Riverlink. As we've indicated, the site derives access from W M Hughes. That's our only viable access for vehicles, but we have provided active transport routes through the site and through to the Riverlink development, such that the existing community via easements and bikeways and footpaths can walk and cycle through the development, as well as the residents themselves getting through to Riverlinks and also back to the wider community. Oops. In terms of flooding, this is a key issue for the development, and I suppose importantly, we recognise the flooding that's occurred in the location, the temporary local instrument that was in place, as well as acknowledging the fill platform that's been established through an approval. So importantly, we have also taken on board through information requests the assessments to review the new scheme and its planning requirements in terms of flooding. Prior to developing the site, we obtained a flood search from council which identified the Q20 at 14 metres, as well as the adopted flood line at 22.7. As I've indicated earlier, we've proposed, well, our building is already filled to above 21 metres in the parts of the site. I suppose importantly in terms of what this new scheme is saying and this development, what we're able to demonstrate here is that all of these dwellings that we are proposing are above the flood level. No houses get flooded as a result of this development internally. But also importantly, in dealing with the assessment of the site works themselves, the regional assessment that's been undertaken assessing the current requirements under the new scheme, as well as the old requirements under the scheme that we've submitted under, show that there is no impact to flooding from the development itself. There are areas that exist that flood now. We do not impact on those external to the site. In terms of the local catchment assessment, again, there are subject areas that flood around the property, but we do not impact or increase flooding as a result of the development. And importantly, when we deal with this, again, all houses are above, or apartments, are above the flood level. In dealing with this, as I've indicated, the development achieves this by being elevated. And this goes back to the stories discussion that I raised earlier. The 3 to 6 levels that are under the scheme have been transferred to 4 and 7 through this development to provide parking at grade level, which increases the height by 1 story. Now those vehicles are all able to evacuate and exit the site as is required and or directed by flood warnings and or by the body corporate which manages this site, which is an important part to any flood evacuation management plan, in that we have on-site managers that deal with this issue and are able to evacuate people either via the community bus that's provided in the development, in the hire cars that are provided in the development, and or by direction from the body corporate managers. Upgrades and infrastructure. We realise that this is a big development in this location, and some of the infrastructure is outdated. Some of the infrastructure needs to be upgraded, and this development does that. This development with stage 1 proposes the upgrade to W M Hughes, as well as a new signalised intersection at W M Hughes with Pine Mountain Road, allowing all movement access and a safer intersection. And that's the key part here. You have 4 or 5 roads converging in one location currently, no dedicated or signalised pedestrian crossing. That is addressed by this proposal. Vehicles will now be able to exit W M Hughes in a safe manner, as well as pedestrians. In terms of the overall development, as I've indicated, a lot of time has gone into making sure that key issues which influence the design are factored into the development itself. We're seeking to develop a new village in this location. We appreciate that's a change, but it's a change that's contemplated currently in the scheme for us, and we believe we are reflecting what the scheme is outlined for the development of this site. Our client is committed to the development of the site and is able to, as is demonstrated by their long-standing commitment and development in this locality, to be able to deliver this development and be able to deliver it quickly. We're able to deliver the open space link along the river. We're able to deliver the Basil Bikeway through the site. We're able to preserve and protect heritage items such as the Mai-Hai, which is retained in the development itself, cleared and valued in terms of signage as well as other ways to identify it occurring on site. As I've indicated, we are an application that's assessed under the planning scheme. We believe that we're consistent with the 2006 planning scheme. We've also had regard to the new planning scheme, specifically in relation to flooding issues. We believe through this managed new village next to the principal centre at Ipswich, we're able to deliver these needed and essential housing options in this location and have the ability to do so rapidly. Thanks.
Thanks, Boyd. Our next speaker is our first submitter. Speaker is Shane Earl.
Hello everybody. Again, as I am Shane Earl, I have been asked to simply attend this meeting because I have a background in heritage construction and conservation work. There doesn't appear to be a great deal of representation at that angle. So I'm here not only in my capacity for what I do in my living, but I am also a local resident and can oversee this current proposed site. So let's look at what is heritage in Australia. Australian heritage encompasses the diverse natural and cultural assets that define Australia's identity and contribute to its national well-being. This includes Indigenous heritage, historic places and natural environments, both tangible and intangible. It reflects Australia's unique history, its stories, its traditions, and the places that are significant to its people. We're here to discuss what impact a housing development may have as a contribution to, or to possibly act as a detractant from the current shared boundary proximity of the iconic Railway Workshops precinct. I truly believe there are opportunities for the integration of heritage structures that can be repurposed into viable structures, which invariably has opportunity to breathe life into those structures that have become lifeless through the lack of use, lack of purpose, and or bear a cost burden to the current owners if they are to be maintained. Our presence here today is not that of concern over the adjoining heritage structures and their repurposing. They will be held at another forum on another day in the not too distant future. Today we are here to discuss the viability of a modern housing enclave proposed in close proximity to the aforementioned heritage listed structures, and whether that development can and or will have any impact on the pre-existing heritage site and its amenity. Sergeant Planning has recently provided a response to submissions put forward by the general public who have stated or indicated a raft of concerns over the development. This is not new and will continue from project to project as time passes. What we do have here, though, is a transition of a city from humble beginnings, struggling with growing pains and adapting to its changing metropolis. After all, we have seen this time and again. Paddington, Brisbane is a good example, from being considered a low socio-economic suburb of Brisbane, with rundown rental and mixed low-income families of the 80s, to a thriving, bustling, economic powerhouse of diversity with a varied integration of housing, heritage and business, including major sport venues. From this example of a generational shift encompassing the past 40 plus years, a gentrification of a historic Brisbane suburb has occurred. Now we fast forward to Ipswich 2025, and we have the exact same gentrification, if not just a suburb, but an entire city. It's a fringe city of the city of Brisbane with its own identity and history. Design and construction play a vital role in the process of that growth and the growing pains felt by the inhabitants as they work towards shaping its future. The inhabitants, or better still, its community, are key stakeholders in the process, and their opinions are to be respected and considered. I've been asked to provide my input as to the impact a development as currently proposed and what it may have in relation to the heritage precinct and its relationship with the surrounding area and community. Keeping an open mind is important, and there are many examples of modern construction working with existing heritage structures. However, the design balance is the key. It must have relevance as to why the development should proceed and the value of the development's approval to the continued success of the heritage structure's survival. In other words, does the development enhance and assist the heritage structure's continued survival and continued contribution to the legacy of its existence within the community to continue to engage with its surroundings, or shall it itself be isolated? Cities and communities must grow to survive. However, the key stakeholders, the community and its duly elected representative, remain accountable for that growth and sustainability in the design process. There is a time and a place for housing, growth and expansion. Our primary question here is the proposal and the balance right? Currently, the site in question is designated open space and has in the past had a number of proposals, all of which indicated to the community that the entire space was to be for community use. This was, I believe, also at the time of transfer of title, always considered to be open space with no consideration of attempting to house private residents. That aside, if it is structurally and civilly possible to design a flood-proof group of structures capable of an outright defeat of the forces of Mother Nature, which I personally dislike the odds given recorded history, what will it look like? If the current adjoining or nearby examples of design and construction, the new developments, have any bearing on the outcome, then I am disappointed. No matter how much fluff and bravado is placed on reports and responses with aspect of amenity and design sympathetic to the existing surrounding structure and landscape, I feel the whole prospect is clearly out of step with what the surrounding community is. It is interesting to note multiple responses regarding reverse amenity. The residential areas are removed from event spaces in the museum. An acoustic report has been prepared to ensure the future dwellings are appropriately acoustically treated to minimise reverse amenity complaints. A concerning response to a question of acoustic impacts and complaints appears a repetition of studies and acoustic design controls built into the design of the residences. However, there appears to be no consideration for the fact that occupying residents are required to be internally caged within the residence to avoid acoustic impact during special events. Is that actually a reasonable response, some relief of responsibility in the construction and supply of multi-unit housing? The only way I see this working from a design perspective is to be completely sympathetic to the area and build with natural timbers in the Queensland style, or blend into the industrial outlook of the surrounding red pressed brick with archways, actual galvanised iron roofs and real design appeal. The current construction design is completely out of step with the area, and no amount of stating that a gable design and a steel frame composite material, flat clad architecture sits right within this landscape will ever convince me. If you're going to take a design step, either be brave and make it world class with major departures worthy of architectural awards, or retract backwards, not as a bad thing, but to sympathetically blend with purpose. Public parklands, as shown in the previous ICC future plan, is more attractive and sensible use of a floodplain with minimal risk involved for all stakeholders, the greatest of which are the key three: community, local government and state government. Thank you for providing me this opportunity.
Thank you, Shane. Our next presenter is Peggy Merriman. Just press the large one to flick across if you need to go back.
Hi, I'm a resident of the North Ipswich Historic Precinct where this is going to all happen. So members of the panel and councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to talk about the traffic implications of the proposed developments affecting W M Hughes Street and surrounds. I also just want to point out that I'm actually not anti-development. I think development, we need it, we need housing really badly, but we do not need to subject our underprivileged people to an area that's so unsafe. And I will talk about that more in my conclusion. I feel very strongly about it. I worked in communities for many years, many Friday afternoons 30 years ago, trying to find people somewhere safe to live or sleep for that night. So just want to put that into perspective, that I'm not just a whinging resident. I've been given the topic of traffic and someone else has done the slides for me. So I'll try and make them go into play. It makes it a little bit more difficult. Road safety concerns. The current traffic report submitted in support of this development fails to accurately address the risks of adding a possibility of thousands of cars and hundreds of pedestrians to this confined area. With access to Pine Mountain Road, the traffic congestion on Pine Mountain Road is already problematic, particularly during peak hours. The strain from the proposed development has not been addressed in the supplied traffic report, for example. Accessing Pine Mountain Road from Musgrave Street near St Joseph's Primary School is already hazarded during morning pickups and drop-offs, afternoon drop-offs. Increased traffic will heighten these risks for parents and children, making an already precarious situation even more dangerous. Just one accident involving a child is one too many, and no development is worth the potential loss of life or to any members of the community. Now, I believe the developer's solution to this is to make the exit onto W M Hughes Street right turn only. This will not solve the problem. When you've got thousands of people trying to go to work or take their children to school in the morning, all lined up, as if they're not going to break that rule, rat-run Musgrave Street, rat-run McLean Street to get onto Pine Mountain Road. Of course they will. And our poor old police force do not have the resources to be sitting there every day to find people for doing that. So it's not going to solve the problem. It's only human nature that they're going to do that. Impact on the safety of the council's Brussels bikeway and walkway. Now, I know it was mentioned that that's all going to be diverted through the new development, but of course I'm sure this one's still going to be functioning and lots of people and the local people use it. There are many, many elderly people in that precinct. W M Hughes Street provides access to this wonderful piece of community infrastructure. It's heavily utilised by local children and adults on bikes, residents exercising or walking for mental health, and individuals using mobility aids and wheelchairs. I see them every day use that bikeway. Increased traffic will create significant hazards for users of this shared space, discouraging vulnerable members of the community, including children and elderly residents, from enjoying it. This will not only compromise safety, but also diminish the community benefits this bike walkway infrastructure was designed to provide. It's not just for people to go through the new development to use the shopping centre, it's for everybody in the area. I must admit, I'm still absolutely shocked, and especially after listening to the sergeant's planning talk about W M Hughes Street. Everyone's going to go through. How can you have that many people coming out of one exit every day? It's just not safe. So most importantly is resident safety, the people who are going to live there. I'm most concerned about. Greater consideration must be given to the safety of residents in both proposed developments, as they both rely on a single entry and exit point via W M Hughes Street, as explained, and right turn only solution at the exit will not address these problems. In the event of a disaster, and it will happen, I don't care how many old plans you've got or where flood levels were, it will happen. They're predicting, the Insurance Council of Australia is predicting 1 metre higher in Brisbane City. That could happen. So it all comes down the same path. In the event of disaster, whether it's flood, fire, gas leak or chemical spills or similar, residents will be forced to evacuate in one direction, potentially competing with emergency vehicles for road access, and with the roundabout at the lowest point in front of those old sheds where it can flood. It's got very close to that just in the last year. This could potentially be a death trap. You're talking about they can get on their bikes. How nice. And they can get and walk through the shopping centre. How about people who've got disabilities and in wheelchairs? You've got to get them out, and you're going to have a few hire cars and one person to help get them all out. It's just a death trap waiting to happen. Additionally, during an emergency, residents from surrounding areas could inadvertently block the exit to the development as they attempt to leave the area. Why should why should our most vulnerable, unsuspecting people be subjected to living on toxic land and land that floods? Any resident who buys into this development won't be able to get insurance. And I've forgotten my phone, I need it. Sorry, I just want to quote the Insurance Council of Australia, just the recent. There's been a lot on the ABC lately about insurance, building in unsafe areas. So the Insurance Council of Australia, ICA, advocates that building on unsafe lands such as high-risk floodplains leads to homes being increasingly uninsurable or prohibitively expensive to insure, with a significant lack of flood cover in such areas. They support developing a national standard for land use, planning and building codes that considers disasters and climate risk, including prohibiting development in high-risk areas. In conclusion, I'd like to say, I didn't go to the next. That's just about the exit, talks about why they can't look at another exit other than W M Hughes Street. So in conclusion, as Ipswich economy passes the 15 billion mark, these developments will not help prepare for this growth, only add to an already stretched infrastructure and the cost to council to house people temporarily when there's a flood. They have to be evacuated. The showgrounds can't take all of these extra people, so they're going to have to find some other solution for that, and the cleanups and the repairs. It'll all be the council's issue. Developers made his money, he's gone, great. Someone else's problem. Ipswich is the oldest historic city in Queensland, and the potential for tourism for the city, which was touched on before, centre is only just beginning. Let's not let this proposed development downgrade this potential. Lost opportunities are irretrievable. It will be a travesty for this unique historic pocket of Ipswich to become a congested, unsafe, suburb with an ill-conceived development on its doorstep. It sounds to me like a dumping ground for the unfortunate, and I think that's dreadful. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Our next presenter is Liz Tilbrook.
Okay, and does it have a pointer?
I don't know. Do you know if it's got a pointer? Don't think so.
Good afternoon. My name is Liz Tilbrook and I live in Wood End. Like many Ipswich residents, I am deeply concerned about the amount of affordable housing available in Ipswich. But we Ipswichians are also very flood weary. The last thing we want to see is more residents put in harm's way during flood emergencies. This development application is seeking to build 472 new units adjacent to their shopping centre. Yes, the habitable floor areas may sit above the RL 22 metre flood line, but this site is a flood island. In a major flood, unless everyone is evacuated, they will become stranded, creating an additional burden for the Ipswich emergency services. Boyd talked about the flood emergency plan. The developer's plan is frankly unworkable. There is only one way in and out, a single driveway for these proposed 472 units, plus sharing that same driveway with 93 townhouses. This is a recipe for chaos in an emergency. And all car parking is on a floodable level, meaning any vehicles left behind would go underwater. The flood plan for this site relies on a caretaker to coordinate a full evacuation as soon as the Bureau of Meteorology issues a flood warning. Down the bottom, a flood warning will typically be issued at a minimum of 6 hours prior to a flood event impacting the area. In the last 8 months, we've had 5 major flood warnings. That would have meant 5 full evacuations and, as it turns out, all unnecessary. This would breed complacency among the residents. The most recent of these flood warnings was for Cyclone Alfred in March. Residents would have been required to evacuate on Thursday, 6th of March, but flooding, if you can remember, didn't become a real threat until late Sunday night. Can you imagine 1,500 residents, aged, disabled, with young families perhaps, leaving their homes for 4 days, returning on Sunday thinking it was all over and they'd missed a bullet, and then being told to evacuate again late on Sunday night, round about midnight, this time in torrential rain where there was a real and imminent possibility of a major flood exceeding the 2011 flood. What would happen? Would people stop complying with the evacuation orders? Some might refuse, or maybe they couldn't even refuse, couldn't find a transport that late at night in the rain. And what would put even more pressure, and that would put even more pressure on our stretched emergency services. And what is the developer's response to these concerns? Has the developer even organised temporary accommodation for these repeated evacuations? No. This slide shows the emergency plans guidelines. We don't even have flood watch in Ipswich. I'm not sure where they're, in Queensland, I'm not sure where they're coming from. What happened? They say the lifts will remain in. Quoting the plan, They say lifts will remain in operation so residents can access the rooftops and wait for helicopter rescue. Really? Helicopter evacuations for up to 1,500 residents across 23 towers? A helicopter can carry up to 5 people per trip, so that could be up to 300 rescue flights. Again, the flood emergency plan, and you'll see second from the bottom, advise all residents on any potential floods, prepare to evacuate site, and evacuation of the site to occur immediately upon a flood warning. But item number 2, or is it 3? Item number 1 is to review the plan every year. Well, I can see this plan being reviewed after the first unnecessary evacuation and thrown out the window and into the Bremer River. And this is an example of the flood warnings, 5 of which we've had recently. Their flood emergency plan is not sufficient, not safe, and not acceptable. Subdivision of the lots. The application also includes a subdivision proposal that should be rejected outright. This slide shows drilling for test samples in September last year to assess the extent of capping breaches in the notoriously contaminated steep bank areas. The drilling auger kept hitting things that released clouds of dust. I sincerely hope the drilling operator had sufficient protection against asbestos dust. The applicant's contamination report concedes, and I quote, "A definitive conclusion about the site's suitability cannot yet be provided." This is in relation to contamination. But most recently, we have been told by the developer that they will fix the problem of contamination with concrete capping. Really? That could be a lot of capping. We've seen the site plan, and lot 2 is the river, the steep riverine allotment. And with this DA, the developer wants to split the built-up platform area, lot 1, which is the coloured area, from the steep riverbank, lot 2. Recently, they proposed gifting lot 2 to council as public open space. Convenient for them because lot 2 has most of the contamination issues with asbestos and heavy metals. Thankfully, council said no. Now, the developer proposes to hand this liability to the future body corporate for the 472 units. That means residents, not the developer, will be left footing the bill for unstable contaminated riverbanks. Don't look here, look somewhere else if we can separate lot 2 from lot 1. This is an unreasonable, unsafe burden to dump on a community. The planning scheme and the developer's track record. This application is being assessed, as we have heard, against the outdated 2006 Ipswich planning scheme, referring frequently to the Q100 flood standards, a term which went out after the 2011 flood. The 2025 Ipswich planning scheme is clear. Don't fill or build on floodplains. Protect ecological and waterway corridors. And let's not ignore the developer's track record. With the Riverlink shopping centre development, we were promised a shopping centre in keeping with Ipswich's heritage character. What we got was a generic shopping centre with blank walls and loading docks facing the river. 118 townhouses at 21A North Street was a similar unfulfilled, historically sympathetic promise. There were historic rail abutments in the Riverlink shopping centre. They were on the brink of being demolished. Fortunately, council intervened just in time. The Bradfield Bridge was only delivered under threat of breach of contract. During the DA process, several submissions have raised the issue of illegal and authorised fill being trucked onto the site over several years. This, it appears, is an ongoing compliance issue. In response, the developer pointed out, and I quote, "This is not a relevant consideration to the application." With a history of disregard for compliance, it raises serious concerns about the credibility and the accountability of the developer, which should be part of an approval consideration. In conclusion, the flood evacuation plan is unworkable. The subdivision shifts risk onto future residents. The application does not comply with an outdated planning scheme, leave alone the current Ipswich planning scheme. And the developer's track record undermines confidence. The site is clearly incompatible with 23 high-density 5 to 7 storey unit blocks on the edge of a steep riverbank. Ipswich does not need another flood island. We do not need 1,500 more people living under constant flood anxiety and at real risk of being stranded in a major flood event. Taxpayers don't need the bill for another inevitable buyback. What we do need is open space along the Bremer River, protecting the waterway corridor and extending the amenity of the Railway Workshops precinct. That is the vision of the 2025 planning scheme and the vision that the people of Ipswich can support.
Thank you, Liz. Our next presenter is Nick White.
Afternoon all, my name's Nick White. I'm a resident of Woodend and a past president of the Bremer Catchment Association. And I'd like to thank the previous speakers for their erudite explanation of what is going on here. I'd like to focus my speech on three major aspects which should prevent this application from proceeding. They are floodplain capacity, an overall view, including the demographic implications, dynamics of flood behaviour predicted and observed, and a critique of the applicant's replies to the submissions. Floodplain capacity. Back in the day, well, this is not before European settlement, obviously, but back in the day, the bank from the Bremer River was a gentle slope up to Down Street. The river had far, far, far more flood capacity than it has today. It was an open, after the arrival of Europeans, the landscape changed considerably, wholesale clearing in the late 1800s, and the first stages of riparian infill had already commenced. You might notice that the railway yards there are actually built up. It must have been a cautionary tale when the floods of 1893, 1894 entirely wiped out, well, it didn't wipe out, but it inundated the workshops. And at this time, when the flood capacity of the river was much, much larger than it was today and had not been changed by anthropomorphic interference. However, the more recent floods of 1974, 2011, and 2022 have been far more damaging. The development of the workshops required the establishment of a more extensive platform, and you can clearly see the erosion already occurring between the fill and the bank. This infilling of the floodplain continues today from City Switch in Ebbw to the Riverlink Shopping Centre in Ipswich City. There's a little bit of questionable workplace health and safety going on here. This is part of Lot 54 where these, the proposed development is to be built. And in this area, the bank is actually steepest. I'll be returning to this. It has the fastest current, and after remediation, and this was supposed to be remediated by the developer, it still has locomotives protruding from it. As Dr. Margaret Cook wrote in her book, River with a City Problem, poor floodplain management has consistently worsened the effects of even minor floods. On this site, decades of modifications have altered the hydraulics of the entire reach. The Riverlink shopping centre alone has changed the flow regime. Now, since 2011, I have noticed, and I'm sure everybody else has noticed, especially those people who just look down the river at River Park Heartlands, that basically the river is asking for its flood capacity back again. So there's collapses into the river. Even Riverlink Shopping Centre has got a few problems at the present moment. This slide is close to where I mentioned the locomotives beforehand. This is a major slump on the river. It's thousands of cubic metres, and this batter was supposed to be a 2-in-1 batter. It's much closer to 1-in-1. Backwards. This is an example of what was happening in the 2001 floods. And just to put this into context, the area on your left is where the proposed roadway is as the escape passage. It was an amazing flood. It scoured that bank completely out, and lots of it collapsed in the river. This is a shot from Hughes Street, looking straight across to Canning Street. Now, there's a railway line there, but you can't see it, it's underwater. Now, I was assured by the developers there that that flood level didn't cover there. Looks like it did. Now, I turn to the actual application, and in that application, and I realise it is on 2006 town plan, but the application went through in 2023. In the application, the area circled in red was noted as a sports ground. Well, at that stage, it had been built up 3 metres. It had a number of houses on it. And, you know, we're supposed to take this on face value. It's not a sports ground. Okay. The escape route. The escape route is on the current plan built up to RL22. And that focuses all the traffic onto a roundabout, which is supported by a retaining wall on the riverside. This structure is going to be placed at a point where a number of factors influencing flood behaviour happen. I'll come back to that. As you can see at the top of the picture, the river takes a right angle bend. Now, river water has, especially when it's flowing fast, has a momentum. That momentum, when it has to turn a corner, actually builds up. So in the 2011 flood, I would have estimated that the area on where the roundabout is supposed to be was probably around about 1 metre higher than the height of the river on this side. And the other rule of thumb, of course, is the further you go upriver, the higher the flood peak gets. We often discuss flood height as the major part of river floods, but velocity is extremely important. And here the modelling shows on a 50% AEP flood, not a big one, the speed of 2 to 3 metres along the Bremer edge, that's in red there. Now, 2 to 3 metres on that kind of soil causes immense erosion. I was going to bring a sample along and I was going to shake it up as an exclamation, but basically the bank just dissolves. Okay, since the inception of this, and that goes back to the platform being built in the first place, that goes back to the platform for these houses being built in the first place, there's been a noticeable increase in bank slumping and erosion for that entire length of river right down past the shopping centre and of course to River Hart Parklands. Now your application mentions that you were going to protect the mangroves in the Bremer. I don't think there's been any mangroves in the Bremer since the late Cretaceous. And this is a page from the BMT flood study commissioned by Ipswich City Council. This notes that findings from both climate change and the ultimate development scenarios highlight that flood levels of the Bremer River, particularly on the lower Bremer, including Ipswich, are very sensitive to such changes. And that's referring to floodplain infill. I'm pretty conscious that in this room at the present moment, there are people who can affect the future of this project. And from my reading of the Ipswich population, there is a very, very strong support of leaving this place as public open space and keeping it in tune with the character of Ipswich. I'm getting a slight wind up here, so I'll leave it there. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Nick. And our final presenter for this session is Adrian. Adrian, if you can come.
Thank you. My name's Adrian Deem and I've been a local resident of North Ipswich and Tivoli my entire life. Just let me start by saying I'm not opposed to a development in this area, but I am opposed to several aspects of this development plan, which will leave the community dealing with several shortcomings after the developer has moved on and the Ipswich City Council will have no recourse to address the issues. It should be noted that the numbers I'll be quoting today have all come from the developer's documentation, which has all been submitted to the Ipswich City Council. My first issue relates to the number of parking spaces. The development plan shows for a total of 663 parking spaces. This number is far too small, and the reasoning put forward for not providing sufficient parking spaces by the developers is fanciful at best. 663 was also based on the City of Gold Coast Council Transport Code, which is probably irrelevant for the Ipswich demographic anyway. Some confusion exists across many of the documents as the design approval with the use of the term residence. 471 or 472 is the number of units that will be built, and the number of residents or occupants will be a much larger number than this, probably well over 1,000 or 1,200. The documentation refers to a parking code that requires 943 parking spaces, 471 for residents, 236 for visitors, and a further 236 for be shared by both residents and visitors. One of the assessors, a company called Birchall's, responded to this question raised by the Ipswich City Council, uses invalid data sets to help justify the developer's non-compliance. It should also be noted that the parking code makes an allowance for more residents and occupants than units. The developer only wants to provide 70% of the parking spaces compared to the parking code. Birchall's have used census data on car ownership as well. Should we know that that's car ownership? For an extremely small number of only 150 1 and 2 bedroom flats in the Ipswich area, which suggests very small numbers of vehicles owned per dwelling, and the parking spaces required using that calculation would be 393. This is an extremely small data set and does not allow for other vehicles such as company cars and the like, and the 2021 census data also showed the number of vehicles owned or used by household members that were garaged or parked near the private dwellings on census night. That data gives a different figure. That data for Ipswich, including houses for people who had no car, 1 car, 2 or 3 cars, shows an average of 1.75 vehicles per dwelling, or in this case, for the 471 occupants, 824 vehicles would have been parked there that night. It should be noticed that 824 is far closer to the parking code requirement of 943 vehicles and a long way away from the 663 the developer plans to provide. The development plan shows a community centre which could accommodate approximately 50 people based on its floor plan size. Nowhere in the design of our applications is there any reference to providing parking spaces for this facility. I'm sure if a community centre was built as a standalone facility in any other location, there would be a requirement to provide ample parking. Any assumption that the community centre will be used by the residents is unsupported. The community centre will be managed by the body corporate, and it will be rented out to groups and organisations outside of the residents to help supplement body corporate costs, adding further impost into the small number of parking spaces the development wants to plan for. The developer has indicated that they would provide 5 electric vehicles and a shuttle bus as justification for not providing the required number of parking spaces. There's no evidence that this will even be a suitable solution for the residents. These vehicles will become the financial responsibility of the body corporate and the residents to maintain. The body corporate will eventually get rid of them to reduce costs, and there's no guarantee that the developer will even provide the EVs and the shuttle bus when the developer claims they have run out of funds, thus leaving the community the problem and a development that has insufficient parking spaces and a council that is powerless to correct the situation. There's a lot of talk about this development being affordable housing. Like most new dwellings these days, it will require 2 incomes to pay for them, either as an outright purchase or as a rental. With 2 or more occupants working there, it's highly probable that the majority of the 470 units may require 2 or more parking spaces. In summary, the 663 parking spaces shown on the development plan is far less than the parking code requirement of 943 and census data of 824 parking spaces. There's no allocation for parking spaces for the community centre, and the suggestion of supplementing the parking space shortfall with community vehicles is a dream at best that will be removed by the body corporate, adding to the burden of the community. The second issue relates to the size of the parking spaces. There's no allowances been made for overlength vehicles. The proposed parking is all set at 5.4 and 6.6 metres. This is supposed to be affordable housing. However, there's a real expectation that several residents will drive utility and trailer combinations or even a small truck. 470 units will attract a reasonable number of MR-sized trucks, delivery vehicles, Uber drivers, Australia Post vehicles, ambulances, etc. And these vehicles will all require larger parking spaces throughout the development, and these parking spaces need to have easy entry and exit. A quick tour of other high-density developments around Ipswich, especially after hours and on weekends, will reveal the reality of what type of vehicles get parked on the streets. Other developments in the Ipswich region have not made allowances for this, and the community suffers the problems of negotiating narrow streets with trucks and trailers parked on the footpaths, especially at night time. Local traffic generation. The design assessments were made using requirements from 2002 and 2013. Calculations were based on a very small number of trips per dwelling. Whilst this may have been the case 20 years ago, it's certainly not the case today. These dwellings will require 2 incomes to support them and far more than 1 vehicle per dwelling that will come and go several times a day and will create a sizable impost to the local infrastructure and the community. By seriously understating the number of vehicles that will be parked in the development, the entire traffic generation modelling for the surrounding areas is probably also wrong and was based upon, as I said, guidelines from 2002 and 2013. That's actually in the documentation that's on the Ipswich City Council website. This one's interesting. Public transport. The design approval indicates that there are several bus stops within walking distances. It's not the case. There's only 2 exits from the development and they are 1.5 kilometres apart, and the existing bus stop is a 1.2 kilometre walk from stage 1 of the development along a route that includes several hundred metres along a road where there is no footpath. It's questionable as to whether the residents will make the trek to use the local bus stop or not. Somehow along, the developer should be responsible for improving this situation to provide bus stops closer to Hughes Street rather than becoming a problem for the community and the Ipswich City Council to deal with in the future. In closing, 471 units is a large development for Ipswich and probably the first of its size for North Ipswich. A lot of the assessments for the surrounding infrastructure in this design application make use of the term minimal impact. There are currently several other developments at various stages throughout North Ipswich and Tivoli also claiming minimal impact. There are many large unutilised lots in North Ipswich and Tivoli that could very well see the similar developments in the coming years. If we continue to allow developers to do nothing because of minimal impact, the summation of these minimal impacts will become a major impact and the community and the Ipswich City Council will have to deal with this in the future. Developments of this scale must provide more and improve the surrounding infrastructure of roads, footpaths, parking, bus stops, etc. It's not up to the community to suffer the long-term consequences caused by developers deliberately understating the facts and to a situation to maximise their own profits. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Well, that's all of the speakers for today. So I just want to say thank you to all of you who have taken the time to speak. Your comments are noted and have been very valuable to the panel in our understanding of aspects of the proposal, both on behalf of the applicant and on behalf of the submitters. I also thank all of those of you that have made submissions through the process as well. Even if you didn't speak today, those are parts of the assessment that will be undertaken by Council and by the independent panel. So that's probably it in terms of where today gets to. As I said at the start, it's now for Council to undertake their assessment. The panel will undertake its independent review in due course as well. And the things that you've raised will remain front of mind for us through that process. So once again, thank you for your time, and it's been very, very valuable to us. So thank you.